I'm Kaylin. My mom and sister burned my grandma's wedding dress, said I didn't deserve it. Then they froze my bank accounts, threw my stuff on the curb like I was nothing. They said it was for my own good. But what kind of family teaches you to doubt your own worth? I always thought the hardest part of getting married would be picking the right shoes, not defending my dead grandmother's legacy in a living room full of judgmental stares. 8 weeks before the wedding, I sat in my mother's pristine white living room, trying not to wring my hands. The cushions were too firm, the air too still. A crystal pitcher of lemon water sat untouched on the table. Everything looked like a magazine spread, sterile and staged, just like my mother liked it. "Let's make this quick," Verena said, flipping open her monogrammed wedding planner like it was the Constitution. "We're 6 weeks behind schedule." Celeste leaned back in the armchair across from me, legs crossed, phone in hand. "I told you to book the ballroom first, Kaylin. Everyone knows those go fast." I forced a polite smile. I was actually thinking of something smaller, something more intimate. My mother looked up, deadpan. "That's not realistic. You're marrying into the viral name, Kaylin. Expectations matter." "And I'd like to wear Grandma Oriel's dress," I said, sliding the words in quickly before I lost my nerve. Silence. Then Verena blinked slowly, like I just asked to show up barefoot. "That old thing? Honestly, you haven't earned it." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. That dress was part of a different generation. And it meant something because your grandmother built something worth honoring. Well, nursing is respectable. But let's not pretend you've carried the weight she did." Celeste didn't even look up from her phone. "Grandma adored you because you were helpless after the divorce. That doesn't make you her heir." I felt the back of my throat burn, but I didn't say a word. I sat there, nodding slowly, like a good daughter does when her mother insults her career, and her sister cuts deeper with that fake smile. I remembered Grandma's voice reading to me in bed, her strong hands folding hospital corners, the scent of lavender she always carried. She used to say, "Dignity doesn't shout, it endures." When the meeting ended, I didn't stay for coffee or small talk. I climbed the attic stairs of our house, my grandmother's house, and pulled the cedar box from the far corner. Inside lay the dress. The lace was yellowed in the most elegant way, the sleeves delicate but still strong. My fingers shook as I touched it. The scent of dried lavender, soft and faint, rose as I unfolded the fabric. "I'm going to wear this," I whispered, pressing the lace to my cheek. "They don't get to decide what's sacred." That night, I asked Mom to speak privately. She didn't invite me in, just stood in the doorway in her silk robe, arms crossed like a news anchor, waiting for cue. "I know what you said," I began, "but I've decided. I'm wearing Grandma's dress." Her lips curved, not into a smile, into something tighter. "Try it, and see what happens." I should have walked away then, but I didn't. I stood there, stunned by how calm her voice was, like she wasn't threatening me, just stating a fact. Like I'd stepped on a chessboard and hadn't realized it until now. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that exact sentence, was the beginning of everything that came after. The unraveling, the fight, the truth. "Try it, and see what happens," she said. I wish I had realized she meant it. "Try it, and see what happens," she said. I wish I had realized she meant it. I kept replaying her voice in my head all the way home, like a ticking clock I couldn't silence. She wasn't loud. She didn't have to be. It was the kind of threat that came dressed up as advice, and somehow that made it worse. I walked into my apartment, dropped my purse on the kitchen counter, and stared at the empty space where my wedding vision board used to hang. I'd taken it down earlier that week, telling myself it was just clutter. The truth was, I didn't want to look at a future I no longer felt welcome in. I texted Soren, "Want to grab dinner? I'm craving that spicy ramen place." His reply came 20 minutes later. "Swamped at work. Maybe tomorrow? Maybe tomorrow. Maybe next week." Lately, everything felt like a delay. I used to know when he was pulling away. Now I couldn't tell if he was just tired or quietly changing his mind. I tried to sleep that night, but my thoughts were too loud. By morning, I decided to bury myself in my shift at the hospital. Work was the only place I could still predict what would happen. Charting vitals, comforting families, changing IV bags. It all made sense. Until my lunch break. I was halfway through a turkey sandwich when my phone buzzed with a new message from an unfamiliar Gmail address. The subject line read, "Just thought you should know." I opened it with the kind of gut instinct that tells you something's about to go terribly wrong. Inside, the email was short. No greeting, no signature. Just this. Kaylin Varel was caught stealing in high school. She's kept it quiet for years. Do you really know who you're marrying? Attached was a scan of an old disciplinary letter from my senior year. I hadn't seen it in more than a decade. My name was circled in red. I sat there, frozen. It was like someone had reached into the past and dragged out a version of me I had long since buried. I hadn't stolen anything. It had been a misunderstanding. Someone else had slipped lip gloss into my backpack during cheer tryouts. The vice principal believed me, but the letter was still filed before it got cleared. No one but my family knew about that. When my shift ended, I drove straight to Soren's condo. I didn't call ahead. I didn't care. I needed answers. I needed to see if he knew. He opened the door in sweats and a t-shirt, surprised. "Hey, what's going on?" I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Did you get an email about me?" He hesitated, barely, but it was enough. Yeah, a couple days ago." "A couple days? You didn't think to tell me?" "I didn't know how. I figured you'd bring it up if it was real." "Real? You thought I actually did it?" He looked down. "I don't know, Kaylin. I thought maybe it was complicated." That hit harder than the email, not because he believed it, but because he hesitated. Because somewhere between his inbox and his heart, he'd let doubt sit and fester. I tried to explain. "I didn't do it. I was framed. They dropped everything. My mom made sure it stayed quiet." He nodded, but slowly. The kind of slow that says, "I hear you, but I'm still unsure." I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just walked out. Back at my apartment, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how quickly things had unraveled. In just a week, I'd gone from a bride-to-be to a suspect in my own love story. I remembered something Soren once told me during our second year of dating, when I'd nearly lost my job over a patient complaint. He'd held my hand and said, "If the world turns against you, I won't." But tonight, his silence had shouted something else. "You're on your own." I opened the email again and read it line by line. Then I stared at the subject line. "Just thought you should know." That phrase. It wasn't new. It was Celeste's favorite opener for gossip. She'd used it when she told me about a nurse getting fired, or when she forwarded articles about other people's failures. And the capital letters in the subject? Just like the way she titled every calendar invite she sent to Mom. That neat, passive-aggressive style that always left her clean, no fingerprints. I didn't have proof, but I didn't need it. I knew. I typed out a text to Soren. "We need to talk." I stared at it. My thumb hovered over send, and then I stopped. Instead, I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out the one thing that hadn't betrayed me. Grandma Oriel's diary. I opened it like it held answers. And in a way, it did. The first page I landed on was dated 6 years before Grandma passed. Her handwriting was steady, neat, the way she spoke. Calm, but every word mattered. "She lies with ease, but no lie is eternal." I knew immediately who she meant. The entry unraveled a secret I had never known. Verena, my mother, had been diverting funds from Grandma's foundation. Oriel had found out. She confronted her, brought it to the board, and they turned their backs. Too much money at stake, too many reputations on the line. "I'll wait, I'll collect more. The truth takes time, but it never disappears." The last line was underlined. I closed the diary and sat still for a long time. My heart wasn't racing. It was something slower than that, a kind of cold realization settling in, like frost creeping across glass. All this time, I thought Grandma had left me a dress. But maybe she'd left me a warning. The next day, I got a text from Mom. "Come by tomorrow. Let's talk about the dress." 11 a.m. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part, the part still clinging to the naive belief that maybe she'd changed her mind, couldn't resist. Maybe, just maybe, this was her way of apologizing. I drove back to the house I grew up in with cautious hope, holding the image of the dress in my mind like a shield. The minute I stepped out of the car, I smelled it. Smoke. Not from a fireplace or barbecue, something acrid, sharp, wrong. I walked into the backyard and froze. There, in the fire pit, flames curled around what remained of a once delicate gown. The lace sleeves had already blackened. Pearls lay scattered in the ashes, still gleaming through the soot. Verena stood beside the pit, arms folded like a woman waiting on a late appointment. "Old things burn easy," she said flatly, not even looking at me. I stepped forward, my voice trembling. "What did you do?" Celeste leaned against the patio door, phone in hand, like she was watching a show. "You said you'd wear it. She said don't. You chose wrong." I dropped to my knees beside the pit and reached into the edge, pulling out a charred piece of fabric that crumbled at my touch. My breath caught. I couldn't speak. My grandmother's dress was gone. Celeste added with that empty smile of hers, "Maybe now you'll finally grow up. That dress was holding you back." "Why would you do this?" I asked quietly, not sure who I was even addressing anymore. Verena stepped closer, her voice cool. "That dress was a crutch. I thought it was time you learned to walk without leaning on ghosts." They didn't yell. They didn't even try to hide it. That's what made it worse. It was all so casual to them, like they hadn't just destroyed the last piece of someone who meant the world to me. I didn't cry. Instead, I gathered the scraps I could find. A burned sleeve, 3 half-melted pearls, part of the bodice where Grandma had stitched her initials. I folded them into my jacket. "Is this supposed to teach me something?" I asked, standing. Celeste shrugged. "Not everything's about you, Kaylin." That's when I remembered something from the diary. Another entry, written years ago. A line that echoed now louder than ever. "Never let anyone decide what's sacred to you." I didn't say anything else. I walked past them, back to my car, carrying what little I could salvage of what they'd destroyed. Back home, I opened the same box where I kept the diary. I placed the fabric inside gently, like it still carried warmth, like I could still smell lavender. They'd burned what they could see, but they missed what I was about to find. They took everything they could burn, but they missed what I was about to find. I was still pressing that charred fabric between pages of the diary when my phone buzzed. "Verena, don't bother coming back. Your things are outside." That was it. No punctuation, no warmth, not even a period to soften the blade. I dropped everything and ran to the house. I don't remember the drive, just the dull roar in my ears. By the time I turned onto the street, I could already see it. The suitcase, the overturned box, my nursing textbooks spilling into the wet concrete like discarded memories. Rain had started falling, not hard, just enough to soak through paper and shame. A neighbor from across the street peeked through her blinds. Another stood at the edge of his lawn, arms crossed, pretending to rake leaves. I walked to the porch and knocked, once, then twice, harder. No answer. I banged until the door finally swung open. Verena stood there, calm as ever. "What are you doing here?" "I need the rest of my things." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You made your decision. This house is no longer yours." I stared at her. "You're throwing me out." "I'm reminding you where the line is," she said. "You crossed it when you chose disrespect over loyalty." "I chose Grandma." "You chose to live in the past." Celeste appeared behind her, arms folded, mouth drawn in that smug way she always used when someone else was hurting. I looked at her, but she said nothing. Verena added, "Oh, and I froze the cards. You're off the family account. Actions have consequences. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. Not to them. I turned, suitcase dragging behind me, half the zipper broken. The wheels bumped over the sidewalk cracks. The rain picked up. I tried calling Soren. No answer. I left a voicemail. They kicked me out. I don't know where to go. Still nothing. By the time I reached the corner of the block, my clothes clung to me, my shoulders ached, and the shame settled into my bones like a slow-moving poison. I wanted to disappear, but I didn't. Instead, I texted the only person who'd never made me feel like I had to earn her love. Me. Tamsin. I need you. She didn't ask questions, just sent. On my way. 20 minutes later, she pulled up, hazard lights blinking, windows fogged from the heater blasting. She didn't hug me, just opened the passenger door, turned the seat warmer on and said, "Let's go." She didn't make me talk. When we got to her apartment, she handed me a towel and a cup of mint tea and left me alone in the guest room. That kind of kindness, quiet, without conditions, hit harder than any insult my family ever threw at me. Later that night, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, still in her oversized sweatshirt, my hair damp, hands curled around the tea mug. I opened my banking app. 0. Everything tied to the family trust? Frozen. My last paycheck hadn't posted. My rent was due in 4 days. I had maybe $63 in my personal savings. I whispered to the empty room, "They want me gone." Erased. But they'd underestimated one thing. I knew how to rebuild from nothing. Grandma had done it. I could too. I reached for the diary again. I flipped back to the page I had marked with the burned ribbon from the dress. There it was, scribbled along the margin in darker ink. In times of exile, plant roots in truth. I didn't know what truth I would find, but I knew where to start looking. And the truth was, buried in papers I hadn't looked at in years. It started with a form. I was applying for rental assistance, something temporary until my paycheck cleared. But the clerk paused midway through the process and tilted her head at her screen. "You're already listed as a co-founder of a private foundation," she said, confused. "Income threshold might not apply." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She turned the screen slightly toward me, like she wasn't sure if she should. There it was. My full legal name, tied to a charity listed as being worth nearly 7 figures. I'd never signed anything, never sat in a meeting, never approved a dime. That night, I ran my credit report. There were accounts I didn't recognize, filings I'd never authorized. My name was tied to things that didn't belong to me, and things that could ruin me. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. My fingers felt numb. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't someone being sloppy. Someone had done this on purpose. Tamsin sat across from me, legs tucked under her, sipping peppermint tea like it was medicine. "You need help, Kaylin. Real help." She found a local legal aid clinic and made the appointment herself. I was too shaken to argue. 2 days later, I walked into a beige building that smelled like copier paper and burnt coffee. That's where I met Ethan Miles. Late 30s, no tie, soft-spoken. He didn't flinch when I told him what I thought had happened. He just took notes and nodded slowly. "These things are messy," he said, "but paper lies less than people do." He walked me through FOIA requests, how to pull IRS filings, which public databases to search. "It'll take time," he warned, "but if they used your name, there's a record." After the meeting, something drew me back to Grandma's house, more specifically, to the detached garage that hadn't been touched since her funeral. The door groaned when I forced it open. Dust floated in the light like quiet snow. I pushed past old furniture, empty flower pots, and a rusted bike, and there it was on the shelf. A faded blue laptop case. I zipped it open. The laptop inside was heavy, outdated. I didn't expect it to turn on, but it did. And what I found inside made my stomach tighten. There were emails, dozens, between Oriel and someone named Tom Kessler, listed as her foundation's accountant. One subject line in bold: Verina's irregular transfers. Need to speak soon. In the threads, Oriel expressed concern about fund reallocations she hadn't authorized. She mentioned confusion about Kaylin's executive role, saying, "I never approved her as a board signatory. She doesn't even know." One email had an attached document, a scanned signature of my name on a grant approval form. I never signed it, but it looked convincing. Ethan's face stayed neutral as he read the emails I printed. "This isn't just unethical," he said, placing the papers down carefully. "This could be criminal." I leaned forward. "I don't care about punishment. I care about what they're doing to Grandma's name. I won't let them use her legacy to build lies." He nodded once. "Then we start filing." That night, I sat in Tamsin's living room, staring at my phone. I typed a message to my mother. "I know what you did. If you touch Grandma's name again, I will go public." I hit send. It was marked read within the hour. No reply. "She's not scared," Tamsin said quietly, standing behind me. I looked up at her. Not yet. But she would be. Soon. It happened 2 days later. Tamsin called me at noon, her voice cracking on the other end of the line. "I'm on leave," she said. "They called me into the director's office this morning, said they got an anonymous complaint questioning my ethics, conflict of interest, with my work and my personal affiliations." I stood up from the couch so fast the phone nearly slipped from my hand. "They said my name?" "Number, but they didn't have to. Kaylin. We both know where this came from. The organization she worked for was under a funding review. They couldn't afford controversy. So instead of digging deeper, they benched her." "I didn't even do anything illegal," she whispered. "Just helped a friend." I closed my eyes. The guilt roared louder than my anger. "I'm so sorry, Tam," she sniffed. "Don't you dare say sorry. Just don't let her win." They had come after me. Now they were coming for the people I loved. When I met with Ethan later that evening, he didn't look surprised. "She's tightening the grip because she feels you slipping through it," he said calmly. "This is fear dressed as control." I couldn't let Tamsin be collateral damage. I couldn't let my grandmother's name be used to keep hurting people who were trying to do good. That's when I saw the poster. Verina had announced a citywide gala in the heart of downtown Austin, the Oriel Legacy Benefit. It was all over social media, her standing in front of a grand piano, holding a crystal glass, Oriel's photo edited in beside her, like a family endorsement from beyond the grave. Every caption praised her dedication to transparency and service. I stared at my phone, numb. Then I made a decision. I would go. Not to make a scene, not yet, but to listen, to watch, to collect every word. I wore a black satin dress, no accessories, no smile, just presence. I slipped into the crowd like I belonged, staying near the back where I could see the stage clearly but remain out of reach. The ballroom was elegant, chandeliers, waiters carrying flutes of champagne, guests in evening wear murmuring praise like it was currency. Then the lights dimmed. Verina stepped up to the microphone, her voice ringing out across the room like a sermon. Oriel was a beacon of truth and grace. She lived for service, for compassion. I'm honored to carry on her legacy, through action, not just memory. People clapped, some even stood. I watched her face as the applause rolled over her, like a wave she'd been waiting her whole life to catch. There wasn't a flicker of hesitation. She believed her own story, or maybe she just believed no one would ever challenge it. Tamsin was there too, quietly seated in the far corner. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. When she walked past me, she slipped a USB drive into my hand. "This is everything," she whispered. "The last 3 years of 1999. Verified, I nodded once. As the event dragged on, I took pictures, video, every donor name, every false statement. I didn't interrupt. Yet. Later that night, back at Tamsin's place, I typed a new message to Verina. "Next time you invoke Oriel's name, make sure you're ready for the truth to follow." She saw it. No reply. But this time, I knew. She was starting to sweat. And when the truth finally came, it burned louder than any fire they ever lit. I walked into the ballroom in a black dress. Not sparkly, not loud, just sharp. Sleek satin with a high neckline and a slit that said, "I wasn't here to hide." Heads turned, but not in the way I expected. There was confusion, a few curious whispers. One woman in a red gown leaned over to her date and murmured something I didn't catch. Didn't need to. I knew what this place was built on. Appearance. Ethan gave me a nod from a table near the back. Tamsin sat beside him, her hair pinned up, her eyes locked on me like a lifeline. We all knew why we were here. We all knew what came next. Verena stood on stage, perfectly poised, her expression a blend of warmth and elegance so polished it almost seemed human. She spoke as if her words had weight. Oriel taught me that service begins with silence, listening to those most in need. That's what we strive for with this foundation. That's why we're here. A video began to play. Soft music, clips of grandma planting flowers with children, giving interviews, holding babies in clinics she helped fund. Then Verena's voice layered over it. She believed in integrity, she believed in legacy, and I believe in her. I watched the crowd nod, their expressions soft. Sponsors, journalists, old friends, they believed her, but not for long. I stood up and moved toward the stage, walking along the far aisle until I reached the tech booth. I didn't rush, didn't make a scene. I simply handed the technician a USB and whispered, "Please play this." Then I walked to the side of the stage. Verena saw me. Her face didn't change, but her eyes narrowed, just enough. I took the mic after the applause started and waited for the room to settle. "I have something to add," I said. "Something my grandmother would have wanted said tonight." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dense, crackling with unease. Celeste, sitting at one of the front tables, stiffened. Her fingers clenched her napkin. Verena didn't move. The screen flickered, and the new video began. First, a document, financial records with my name, clearly forged. Then a boardroom recording, Verena's voice directing funds away from their intended programs. Finally, an email from Oriel to her accountant. "If this continues, I'll go to the authorities myself. I won't let my name be used to cheat people who believe in what we built." A few gasps. One sponsor stood up and quietly exited the room. Another woman beside him whispered something and followed. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Verena stepped forward and grabbed the mic. "This is manipulated footage, selective editing. Anyone can fabricate emails these days." I looked at her, my voice even. "The only thing edited here is your soul." Celeste leaned toward her and whispered something sharp. Verena's jaw locked, her posture brittle. "It's over," Celeste muttered. "You burned the dress. She just burned your mask." Then I saw them, two plainclothes officers near the side entrance, moving calmly but with purpose. They walked toward the stage, speaking quietly to Verena. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She looked at me with the coldest expression I'd ever seen and whispered under her breath, "You'll regret this." I met her eyes. "You burned what I loved. I just revealed what you hid." And with that, the woman who had tried to erase me walked off the stage, not as a matriarch, but as a scandal in heels. But not every fire is meant to destroy. Some are meant to cleanse. The week after the gala was a strange kind of quiet. No more anonymous threats. No urgent knocks at the door. Just the echo of what had already burned. News outlets ran cautious headlines. Local philanthropist under investigation. They didn't use the word fraud yet, but the undertone was there. The Oriel Funds accounts were frozen. The gala sponsors pulled out. Donors issued statements. Even the board had started releasing polite, carefully worded apologies. Ethan sat across from me in the courthouse cafeteria after one of the hearings and said, "We've done what we needed to do. Let the system catch up. That part's not on you anymore. But it didn't feel like relief. It just felt like space. I wasn't angry. I wasn't satisfied. I was just suspended, like my life had stepped outside of itself and was waiting for permission to begin again. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Handwritten envelope. My name, no return address. Inside was Celeste's handwriting. Neat, like always. I don't expect forgiveness, but I owe you truth. She wrote about the pressure, the grooming, the burden of being the image. How Verena had been shaping her since childhood, teaching her to speak a certain way, sit a certain way, even think a certain way. I wasn't just told to stand beside Mom. I was told to be her. There wasn't space for anyone else's story, yours included. She admitted to sending the email, the one that accused me of stealing. It was my words, but her voice. I believed her. I envied you, because you got to love Grandma freely. I only knew how to compete with her memory. She didn't ask me to forget. She didn't ask me to meet. Just ended the letter simply. If someday you want to talk, I'll be here. If not, I understand. I didn't cry. Not right away. I sat at the table with that letter in front of me all night, sometimes reading it, sometimes just staring at the handwriting like it was a relic from another life. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw it away either. The next morning, I walked to what used to be Oriel's garden. The lavender had bloomed early that year. The air smelled like sun-warmed soil and sweet roots. I sat on the edge of the stone path, fingers grazing the leaves. Somewhere, in a whisper I could only feel, I heard her voice. Even those raised in shadows can still find light. Back at the apartment, I talked to Tamsin as we sipped coffee near the window. She wants a way back, I said, but I don't know if I want her anywhere near it. You don't have to, Tamsin said. You don't owe anyone a reunion, not even your sister, not even if she regrets it. I nodded. She was right. This wasn't about making peace with Celeste. This was about making peace with myself. That night, I took the letter and tucked it between the back pages of Grandma's diary. Then I closed the cover gently. Not forgotten, not forgiven, but seen. That's enough for now. The dress was gone, but something stronger had taken its place. We didn't make a big announcement. There was no glossy invitation, no waitlist for RSVPs, no headlines. Just a quiet message sent to the people who mattered. We were getting married again, this time on our terms. Soren and I chose a small community garden just outside the city, tucked between rows of lavender and wild herbs. No chandeliers, no media, no one calculating headlines. Just 30 guests, a handmade arch, and a lemon cake from the corner bakery. I don't want the woman who fits anyone's expectations, Soren had told me the day we set the date. I want the one who walked through fire and didn't flinch. The black dress I wore wasn't mourning anything. Tamsin had it made with a local seamstress, soft, simple, flowing like memory. Tiny lavender sprigs lined the hem, stitched with care into the folds of the fabric. Grandma's favorite flower, a silent presence in every thread. People watched when I stepped into the aisle, not with surprise, with stillness. This time, I wasn't walking toward a family trying to mold me. I was walking toward someone who had seen every scar and didn't ask me to cover them. The ceremony was brief, but the vows lingered. I held Soren's hands and said, I lost a dress, I lost a home. I lost the illusion that family always means love. But somewhere in all that ash, I found something else. Something no one could burn. Me. He looked at me, eyes soft and steady. You never needed saving, but thank you for choosing me, even when you could have walked this path alone. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even Ethan wiped at the corner of his glasses. After the applause, I stood off to the side with Tamsin, watching guests gather around the cake. She nudged my shoulder gently. You wore black, and still managed to be the brightest one here. I laughed quietly. It's not grief, it's a statement. Louder than any speech, she said. Verena's trial was ongoing. The Oriel Fund had been restructured under new leadership, with Ethan overseeing transparency reforms. I chose not to press further charges. I'd done my part. Let the system do what it must, I told him when he asked. I'm done holding the match. Later that afternoon, after the guests had gone and the cake had been picked clean, I returned to the edge of Oriel's old garden. The lavender had taken root again this year, tall, purple, defiant. With Soren beside me and Tamsin watching quietly from a bench, I knelt in the soil and planted one more young bush. I pressed a small stone beneath it, etched by hand, for everything that couldn't be silenced. The breeze stirred, and for a second, I could swear I smelled her perfume. That soft mix of earth, sun, and lavender. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't magic, it was presence. At dusk, I stood alone by the garden, my fingers brushing the petals. I wasn't smiling, I wasn't crying, I was just still. A voice moved through me, maybe hers, maybe mine. This was never about the dress, it was about remembering who I am when no one's watching. Some people spend their whole lives trying to fit into a family that never truly saw them. I spent mine trying to protect a legacy that others tried to erase. But what I've learned, what I hope you remember, is that dignity isn't something others give you. It's something you reclaim, piece by piece, when everything else falls away. This story wasn't just about a wedding dress. It was about choosing truth over comfort, self-worth over approval, and legacy over appearance. So, let me ask you, have you ever had to stand up against the people who were supposed to stand by you? Have you ever walked away, not out of anger, but out of love for yourself? Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story moved you, even just a little, drop a 1 below, or let me know where in the world you're watching from. And if it didn't hit you the way you expected, that's okay too. Tell me why. I'm here to listen. If you want more real, raw, and deeply human stories like this, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Thanks for watching and for staying until the very end.